Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. Be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed yet, click that subscribe button and the little notification bell. Ring my bell, baby. But on to the point. I had a few people link this to me. They're like, Jason, Brandon Harding made this whole video of who he thought was natty in the industry or not. And he thinks Simeon Panda is natural. And let's just keep this respectful. The whole thing was kind of comical. Let's just be realistic here. Brandon is himself relatively new to the gear world, right? Relatively new. He came out, and a lot of people were really shocked at the amount of size that he has versus what all he was using. I'm not going to get into all that. I'm not going to discuss any of that aspect of it. We don't need to go there. But it's fair to say that Brandon is, I know he's got at least a few years of training experience. He's not a vastly experienced lifter, but he has some experience, right? He has some experience. He's not a novice by any means. He's fairly new to the gear world. Has run into a lot of problems, a lot of side effects, which he admitted. He talked about his own struggles with it. And whether you like the guy or not, or whether you think what he did is wise or not, and I don't think it was wise, I'll respect the fact that the guy actually came forward, talked about his own issues with it, and I actually hope he's doing better, and I hope it's been a learning experience for him, and I hope the guy has got whatever therapy he needs, because he was struggling with anxiety and depression and all sorts of issues as a result of a lot of this, and so I legitimately hope that he's come through that okay. Because, you know, that's serious stuff. And again, he talked about his struggles with that publicly. Well, the thing is, he's kind of made this whole thing of who he thinks is natty or not. And really, to me, it was just kind of like a shot in the dark. And I don't think it was particularly accurate. Because people have said, hey, what's your opinion on that? It's like, it just wasn't that well done. And I'm not saying he didn't get some right and wrong. I'm not saying he didn't, because he did get some right and some wrong. But the one that puzzled me was the Simeon Panda. And I've met Simeon in person. Okay, this is going to be one of these where it's going to be unusual. A lot of times I'll laugh and say, look, I'm bigger than this person or that person, right? And then people think that it's bragging. It's subjective facts. It's objective facts. Not bragging. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's just an objective fact. Simeon is bigger than me. Okay, I have met Simeon. When I say bigger, Simeon is probably bigger than a lot of the guys who you guys think are big who aren't really that big in person. All right, let's clarify that. That's the problem with the internet. You see people on camera. How they look on camera is not always indicative of what they look like when you meet them. Simeon's a big dude. Simeon's a big dude. Let's make that very clear. And when I say he's bigger than me, in my experience, most of the YouTubers and fitness personalities I've met out there are shorter with less muscle and less body fat than me. Simeon's about 2 inches taller. Estimate. I'm going to just estimate here. I'm going off memory because it's been like 5 or 6 years. If I had to estimate, Simeon's got a good 2 inches of height on me, maybe an inch or two. But probably 2 inches, right? He's slightly taller than me. If I remember, like, just what I know, because I see myself in the mirror, I know where I'm at, he probably had 15, maybe 20 pounds of solid muscle. Maybe 20 pounds of solid muscle over what I've got today when I met him in person. He's a pretty good-sized dude. Like, you look at Simeon, and he's a big dude. Okay, let's just make that clear. The difference is, a lot of times when we talk about the size of people, they're not the size you think they are. Like, a lot of people might say, oh, so is someone like Jeff Side in the same range? Jeff Side's got 50 pounds less muscle than Simeon Panda. Okay, period. If you had me guess, just based on memory, having seen them kind of on the same floor, Simeon's got 50 pounds of muscle on Jeff Side. Flat up. Or he did back then. Easily 50 pounds of solid mass on him. So there's your perspective. So kind of what Brandon said, his excuse was that he's like, well, it's because he's black. Look, that's not how this works. And you can't just say that, because let's be realistic here, man. I got a lot of followers, and go look at my posts, look at my wall. I got plenty of black dudes who follow my channel who wish that was true. Who wish that was true. They wish that they could just breathe at a weight and have 19-inch arms. That's not the real world, Brandon. And we do understand what you're saying. Yes, we do know that there can be some differences in gene flow. Like, no one is denying that. No one's denying that. But when you look at the studies and the stuff that's even looked, because this has been studied, yes, there is that bias there, but it's not nearly as pronounced as people think it is. Okay, it's not as pronounced and exaggerated as people actually seem to think it is. So it's like there's a cognitive dissonance there. When you start getting into talking about muscle fiber distributions and stuff like that, I think what you end up finding when they've looked at that is that something like 3% of black dudes have like that gene that you're talking about. 3%. Such a tiny minority for the fast twitch dominant. And I think the same studies have found that like 1% of European dudes have the same gene. We're talking about little tiny segments of the population from any group. Like that's tiny, that's microscopic. It just seems pronounced because it's like, man, three out of 100 have got that fast twitch gene that you're thinking of, that athlete gene. 3%. The other 97% of dudes are like, man, I got screwed on that one. Okay, so what is it that we're really talking about when guys step away from that? Because that's not going to give you 20-inch drug-free arms. Okay, that's not how it works. You're going to be able to gain muscle and power a little bit faster. Yes, absolutely. Going to be a better sprinter. You're probably going to get a max squat a little bit quicker. Right? That's what that usually means. That means that someone with that gene that you're thinking of, they're going to get to a 400 squat 6 months faster than other people are. That's what's going to happen if they train it. They're going to cut their time windows way down to get there. And that's true. They're going to get a 300 power clean a lot faster than other people will. Like the less months, less total years are going to have to be put into that. But it's not going to be 30 pounds of muscle difference on somebody. That's not how it works. So what is the other thing that people are talking about? Again, this has been studied. This has been looked at. What they have found, I think it's some studies that looked at differences in male athletes. What they found was that, and this will explain a lot, is that people of West African descent, specifically the men, store more intramuscular fat in their arms. Right? They have larger triglyceride stores in their biceps and triceps. What does that mean? I don't know that it's easier to get an extra inch on their arms in diameter. That's what it basically means. It's worth, if you look at it, they're going to get about an extra inch on arm. Some of those same guys, they are a little bit leaner. They gain body fat slower. They gain body fat a little bit slower. They're a little bit leaner, easier. Therefore, getting ripped up, a little less work for them. Some of them don't have to watch their diet quite as tight. Okay. I mean, that's a difference. That is a difference. But when you break that down, that doesn't account for having like 20, 25, 30 pounds of muscle tissue over other people with your same frame. That isn't how it works. And the other thing, he's like, well, I met some of his family and they were jacked too. Well, again, that's not evidence of anything. That means, yes, does it mean good genetics for size and strength and athleticism probably run in his family? Sure. Sure. I mean, if all the dudes are jacked, but the thing is, they all lifted. Okay? Your assumption, and this is the thing, he said his assumption was that they were natural. His assumption is that they didn't train really, really, really hard for years. Okay, well, here's the thing I might point out. Maybe they did train really hard. All right, maybe his dad and his brother trained really hard, and they were serious about lifting, and that's something that was just part of their family. And what I mean is that if you have a family culture of weight training, maybe that's why Simeon got into lifting. Maybe Simeon started lifting really, really young because his whole family was into it. I mean, that would make sense. But your assumption that because he does this as a profession, that the other guys in the family, the whole family doesn't train really hard, that's ludicrous. That's a ludicrous assumption. If the dad and his brother are both jacked, they probably do train really, really hard and probably have trained really hard for 10, 15, 20 plus years. Furthermore, the assumption that they're natural. You don't know that. You don't go, oh man, all the dudes in this family are real jacked, so therefore this guy who's jacked must be natural. Because they didn't tell you they're on gear? That doesn't mean anything. Well, let's come back over and be realistic here. Most people aren't honest about their gear use. Furthermore, had you asked them about it because they know that you're someone who's in the industry who might talk, they know that their family member, that a lot of his income is tied to his claims of natural status. They know they're tied to it. If they care at all about the well-being of their family, they're not going to go say, oh yeah, but we've been pen and test or whatever. They're not going to say that. Because they know that could negatively influence a member of their family. That could negatively influence Simeon for them to go blabbing that stuff, admitting they're using stuff. Because if they're using stuff and he's bigger than them and in the same family, then that means that he's using stuff. You see the issue with that logic? That's the problem with that logic. There's a lot of issues there. It doesn't work. That's not really proof of anything. And at the end of the day, we've got to be realistic about what limits are for frames and what people can hold, and it's just not realistic. And just being honest here, it's not realistic to think by any stretch of the imagination that Simeon's a natty. Okay, it just isn't. It's not. The dude is big. Dude is real big. And it's not just his arms. Because there's a difference. What you're talking about is how people look on camera because they're lean and they have really great full big arms. Okay? That's not the same thing as being big. Simeon is big top to bottom. He's a jacked dude. He is above the natural limit for his frame. No matter how good your genetics are, how hard you train, he's above that limit. And I'm not knocking it, I'm just calling it like it is. I've seen the guy in person. I've been around the iron game a long, long time. And if you were to come to me and use that logic of describe what his family, I'd be like, well, I think based on what you said, yes, his family itself have good genetics for getting big and strong and jacked. Okay, that's clear. That's evident. But I'm going to go on a limb and say maybe the dad and the brother been training really hard a long time too. Maybe they're using a little bit of that there. That's very likely the case. All right. Sometimes we just have to use some common sense with this stuff, guys. We got to use some common sense. You don't just automatically jump up and it's just, oh yeah, this guy's a genetic freak, or this whole assumption that's also ludicrous that every black dude out there just automatically just breathes it away and they just turn into Ronnie Coleman. It's almost like there's this stereotype, and it's not true though. It's not true. Believe me, I've trained with enough black guys over the years. I've met enough black guys over the years at gyms who train. I think you'd be surprised. Just as many of them are working just as hard as you, trying to get the same gains, guys. All right, they're in there, putting in the work, trying to get the same gains. It really is not as different as you think it is. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.